20 years of experience in OD and learning as a space. He's passionate to bring people to achieve their full potential using various OD methods and deep research. And throughout his career, he has worked on a lot of programs, initiatives to enhance leadership, mentoring, boosting performance, deepening learner engagement, and cultivating positive cultures in different teams. So beyond his contributions at Kaiser Permanente, he also imparts knowledge to aspiring leaders by teaching courses in Master of Science in Leadership Studies program at National University. And adding to that, he's a facilitator, trainer, and has lots and lots of rich experience in this space. So a huge welcome to C-Suite Reflection Room, Tony. We are very excited to talk to you today.
Thank you so much, Nikita. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Awesome. So let's start with the topic of our discussion, Tony. So as we traverse the world of OD, linking assessments to development and focusing on IDPs that could have mentoring, coaching, and various parts of its journey. We would like to today discuss a little bit about how these journeys are done for every individual and really the impact on organizations when it comes to strategic workforce planning and ROI of these initiatives. So that's what we want to discuss today. Let's dive in and start with our first question. So in our earlier episodes, we discussed about a very well-researched topic of competency assessments, a science which is well proven and has been backed by a lot of big providers in the industry who are like Hogan, Caliper, MBTI, Big Five, who are able to provide very good rich assessment insights. However, the next critical step for OD teams is that how do you translate these insights into actions, journeys, mentoring for employees? And that is where scalability comes into the picture. So we would like to know from you, with your experience, how do you approach about creating developmental interventions that truly address every individual's specific needs and moving us beyond generic solutions?
Yeah, this is a really big question because it's a tough one. And let's start with the most ideal scenario here. The talent function has taken all the job roles in the organization and they've mapped the competencies for every one of those job roles so that when the assessment's done, the manager has the results that not only have they mapped all those, but they've also mapped them with available development resources. So then for the manager, it essentially becomes plug and play. Okay, I have the software engineer. Here's where they're doing well. Here's where they still need some work. I know the needs. Okay, the organization has these development resources that correspond with those. It's very easy. I just follow the path. Well, the truth is most organizations just simply are not that developed. They haven't, that's a lot of work. You know, organizations can, depending on the size and complexity, have hundreds of job descriptions. It's a tremendous amount of work. And by the time you've gone through and mapped all those, some of them might have already changed by that point because roles shift. You've added new roles. So it can just be a very cumbersome amount of work to do. In reality, the learning function tends to manage different programs. So they might have leadership development programs. They may have, coaching programs, mentoring. They might manage, let's say, like an Open Sesame subscription for e-learning. And in that sense, they might take a more consultative role. So managers reach out, or they're maybe supporting different aspects of the business. And they say, okay, let's sit down, look at all your people, take, an hour, look at all the people on your team, and then we'll talk about, what things we would recommend for each of these folks based on the results. That still takes a lot of time. So this is where AI can really come in to add to this process because it can provide coaching and education. It can provide feedback that is specific to the person, that is when they are able to do it. So if you've got 15 minutes after a meeting, you can go on there and do something with, an AI companion. If you're a manager that needs to role play for a difficult conversation, you can use your AI companion. It has confidentiality, so it can really help that process. And I think going forward, it's going to be about how we integrate that in to make those much more effective and seamless.
Got it. Yeah, that sounds quite interesting. And I think, that last mile customization and talking to an individual, like a safe space, like your own mentor who's not going to share anything with anybody and is available at a click of a button, is
Yeah.
something that definitely, technology can enable us with. So, Tony, I think that brings me also to a very important point, that these programs are not just about learners, they are about program managers like you, who always have to constantly prove the ROI of such programs, tell leadership that what have you changed really, has anything changed? And a lot of times competencies, mentoring as an area is so intangible, right? So it just becomes like, okay, what do I tell you? I can feel the difference, I can see it in people, they're happy, but I don't know how to quantify that. So how do you handle and tackle that problem?
Yeah, it's a really big one because it's true when, budgets start to get cut, businesses struggle. The talent function is often one of the first ones to, feel that. It's been a saying in that field for many years. Talent's one of the first ones to get cut. Measuring ROI is really important, but it all starts with really every piece of those learning activities has to align with the needs of the business. It has to be strategic. And so that's really the number one opportunity, is making sure that all the work you're doing, you can justify how it supports the business goals, that it's not just because it sounds good or seems like the right thing to do. How does it actually make sense for the business? In that sense, you're now looking at when we're doing learning and calling the effectiveness of it, what do we actually mean by the effectiveness? Because with the Kirkpatrick model, there's 4 different levels to it. It's one of the most widely models used for measuring learning effectiveness. And it's, what do you need that learner to do as a result? Do you just need them to be aware of it, and that's all the business needs from that person? Just be aware of the topic? Or do you need them to actually know the information, which is different? So you would test that differently, and that would tell you if it was being effective, which is going to be your return on your investment. I had this person do this 1-hour course to learn about this topic, to get this information. Do they actually know the information? If so, did we receive the result we wanted for the time that we invested having this person do that? Yes. Okay, you've shown some return on investment based on the needs. Or do I need them to actually change their behavior to do something with that? We see this with leadership skills. We see this if you're learning about a new application, you have some technology change management happening. We need them to actually start using this new process. When we get to business level stuff, that's where it really makes more sense, I think, to look at outcomes with it. So for example, I'm doing leadership development. It's going to be very difficult for me to say, okay, we've invested in these folks for leadership development. Here's where the business is making more money as a result. It's going to be very difficult to prove that connection. There's so many things. Business is too dynamic to do that. What you can do is say, on that team, how is their employee engagement? Has that improved? How is their productivity numbers? Has that had improvement? How about employee grievances, absenteeism, people showing up, our ability to retain employees? How are we doing on our metrics as a team that let us know if we're performing better? If so, I can do that at a local level. I can look at how that is across the organization, and that gives me a much better sense of are those things working? So there are some ways to do it. It just requires being very strategic and trying not to create a clear connection, but really looking at outcomes instead.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I think these are some of the metrics that a lot of talent and OD teams are looking to solve for and show the needle movement on. And when we look at even our platform, we try to capture these data points, but not in an episodic way, but in a regular, continuous stream of data, because again, data when condensed and created with lots and lots of inputs, that becomes more reliable as compared to having just like some bit of measurement done sporadically. So I think that's somewhere power of data can come into the picture when we have loads of it and when we have continuous data being measured over a period of time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think one important question that comes to my mind for the world that we exist in today, where AI or technology is still not so well penetrated, especially in the OD world, where talent teams are still looking at, doing a lot of things manually and trying to run these programs with Excel sheets. How easy or how difficult you find to run these programs and constantly capture data, follow up on getting people to respond well, honestly, and really giving the right kind of feedback in the moment when they're experiencing these interventions and not really waiting for, say, weeks to capture that data. So how do you handle administration and monitoring of this data?
Yeah, you know, it kind of varies on a few factors. One is how complex the system is that you're trying to use. So if you are really just using an Excel spreadsheet, that's pretty basic. If you have like a learning management system where you're able to track this sort of stuff, or some sort of system where you can track, okay, this person's been assigned these things, maybe they've requested to complete these programs, they've been put into this, leadership pathway, they're completing these modules to build their tech skills, whatever that happens to be. Okay, it might be able to help track their completion. There might be some, knowledge checks on there to validate that they're actually learning and not just, clicking on it and then doing something else. And then sometimes it also really comes down to just how familiar the people in the business are with those systems. Because if the system's too complex, too complicated, they don't use it that often, then it's going to just feel like a real pain for them to actually go and engage with it. They're like, I know it's there, but I don't want to deal with it. So, the user experience has to be really good. It has to be really simple. I think there has to be some good job aids, some things to kind of help make it easier, because if you're only going in there a few times a year as the manager, then you're going to forget the next time you go in there.
Yeah.
So it takes a little bit of that. But this is also where, again, AI can kind of help provide some additional support, because it can provide feedback. You can have things where learners are nudged to do certain things, where they're asked different questions. It's able to generate some feedback. You can engage with it conversationally about topics. And so it's able to, also do ongoing sort of assessment and, kind of feedback on things as you're going, in combination with, having to maybe do more structured learning activities.
Got it. And this is very interesting, and I think user experience really drives the whole success of a program, because only when users are engaged and they really feel that this journey, and platform or no platform, it's just like part of that journey. If that journey really makes a difference in their life, only then they want to be engaged with it and they want to do it. And we are talking about our very important high potential talent who we are wanting to invest time in, and for us their productivity and time is very crucial, important. So it's very important that they are engaged in the journey. What are the other design factors that you feel are important for program managers, OD leaders, to really consider integrating technology into their programs apart from user experiences and data?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, just about everything has some level of user experience with it. If I'm program managing and I'm going through using the system on the back end, that's the user experience for me versus the people in the business that are using it. There's going to be user experience on every touch point, really. But as far as other factors, I think it's again, looking at it strategically. What do you need that system to actually do? Sometimes organizations will onboard a system and then find out it doesn't actually work the way they thought it would work. And then they find themselves really frustrated and they're having to go back and forth with the vendor. And sometimes it can become a real hassle. Like, I've dealt with that before, and it's really, really frustrating. you're going in looking at the contract, seeing if you can get out of it or challenge it because it just feels like they didn't deliver what they promised. So really kind of understanding that from before you even started with the system, knowing what you really need, trying to be really diligent and thorough in when you're researching vendors, creating that business case, selling that to the business, that you're really kind of taking the responsibility to, move the business in a positive direction. And then once you've done all that, I think there's also a lot to be said for just how you introduce that into an organization and keep that going. So when new people are onboarded, how are we making them aware of it? How are we making it simple and easy to use? How are we making it so that they actually want to engage with it? That's a part of it. We get those like mandatory compliance trainings that you have to do. Okay, go log in, do your, data security training, do your anti-harassment training. We do them because we have to. Not too many people get excited by them. Maybe some do, but we realize it's a requirement. On the other, if we have resources that people find valuable, topics that they really need, we've got different options. So if they want something that's more in depth, if they want something that's just very short form, like a micro learning, and then also just realizing it doesn't have to be everything to everyone. Times where me as a learning professional, as I'm sure you do, when you need to know a certain thing, I just go to Google and look at how do I do this specific thing. Now I might Copilot and ask how I do that specific thing, but I can go and just search, and that way I need this one specific thing, and it does a much better job at telling me where to find that information, and then I can go do it in about 30 seconds rather than going and searching in an LMS, trying to find a whole course when really I'm just trying to learn this one thing. It's not the right solution. So I think also just understanding like the role it fits, the role in an organization, so that you can kind of position and communicate it well. And then that's also like in how you're communicating it with senior leaders, so that you can kind of help manage expectations on how is this really intended to be used. If we want it used differently, then we need to change our approach and maybe how we design. But I think people are always going to be Googling or going into ChatGPT or Copilot or something and asking questions for very simple, like just-in-time stuff. And that's okay.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. I think, so that's very interesting, right? I mean, with the surge of so many tools around us, I think we are becoming way more empowered than we ever were. And that's great because, we can just type a problem at ChatGPT and we can get an answer at a click of a button. That makes life difficult for technology providers like us, because I think we have a lot of competition even from the tools around that exist for people. But also that's quite interesting and makes me think about, more and more on how this impact needs to be measured at a cumulative level and not at an individual only, right? So how organizations need to measure their productivity, and how do they get that holistic picture of what this program is contributing towards not just people in those programs, but also at a larger level organizational impact. So when we look at some of the capabilities and some of the competencies and skills that are emerging that need more and more focus from OD teams, and you see that things are changing around us, legally, regulatory wise, even so many different things happening across countries economically. What do you feel are top skills that come to your mind which should become a part of OD interventions, and we should focus on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's one that seems pretty evergreen that's just always been there, and another one that's been certainly much more emergent the last few years. So the one that's been pretty evergreen that I've experienced in my career just has to do with communication. Humans are social creatures. Businesses or organizations comprised of people. So whenever you get people together, there's going to end up being conflicts or disagreements, different ways of seeing things. It's natural. And as a result, that can get in the way of, performance. Sometimes you have healthy conflict and it actually helps the team work better, but in many cases, it can be kind of detrimental to the team. So there's always been kind of a need on having people learn about one another, understanding themselves. Why do I behave the way I behave? What's behind that? When I get frustrated, upset, if I feel like I need to have a conversation with someone, I put it off and I hope that the issue will go away, or I get really nervous and anxious. Really understanding what's behind all of that so that you can help them build the comfort level to do it. And because people are, moving around to different jobs, they're with different groups of people. So they have to kind of like learn some of that stuff over because it's now with different people involved rather than the last team. So there's always things that are shifting that cause us to do that. You always have people kind of coming and going. And that really shows up a lot when it comes to managers having difficult conversations on their teams. They get nervous. What if the person shuts down? What if they start crying on me? What if they get really angry and upset? What if they file a grievance? We have labor unions here. So when you're with an organization that has represented employees in a union environment, that adds an extra layer of stress for some people if they feel really worried about that. So helping them build that competency, and even within teams, just how to work amongst one another and deal with disagreements in a healthy way, that's been evergreen that I do not think is going to change. Whether you're in person, you're remote, you're hybrid, it's still human interaction. The other one that's been much more recent is definitely AI skills and familiarity. People had to learn to get really resilient throughout the pandemic. That was very recent. They had to learn to adapt. They dealt with things in a much different kind of chaotic environment. People are able to do that fairly well, I think, when really kind of pushed to do it. With AI, it's just such a new thing. I think a lot of people by this point are at least heard the term and are aware of it. But there's still a lot of people I talk to that they don't really know what the heck it is. And you even say like Chat GPT and they're like, what is that? And they get the letters kind of mixed up and they're like, what? So there's still quite a bit of tech literacy around that new topic that's emerging that's going to have to happen. And so, I think learning first about it, being aware of it, knowing about some of these different tools, ways that you can take advantage of it, from simple things like, hey, I need to draft a message to go out for this group. Help me draft it. Or I'm going to reply to this email. I know the way I would say it might not sound the most friendly, but like, here's what I would really say. And then I put that in there and say, all right, please help me write that in a way that sounds much more friendly. Okay, it can help me do that so I can, balance and I can still be myself without coming across insensitive. It's able to help bridge things like that. Simple stuff that way to far more complex tasks that I can have it do, or even creating agents that can go and perform certain tasks for me. So, there's a lot there. I think also part of that with AI is just getting educated on which sort of roles, which sort of fields are going to be most likely to be impacted by this stuff. And there's still a lot of unknowns. We think it's going to impact certain fields some ways, but we actually don't really know until we get there. Like one example is, at least here in the US, a lot of grocery stores went to self-checkout. And actually a number of grocery stores have started to scale that back as people would just walk out with things, extra items, or people wanted, like having the personal service of a checkout cashier. And so some companies have actually moved back from like just automating things so much to allow that. So, but being aware, getting educated, AI is basically kind of like when the internet came on the scene and it was this new thing that really changed how we worked. AI is kind of like that next stage of evolution in that technology, process. So I think that's really kind of like the biggest area right now for folks to kind of learn about and be aware of. And there's always just new stuff coming out. So it can feel overwhelming, but at least just starting with watching some videos, learning about it, going and interacting with one. I've told people, go onto an AI and just ask it what it can do. Like just start asking it questions and it will explain itself to you. So even simple things like that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I so agree with you. And in fact, when we look at some of the data points that our users are asking AI, we're quite amazed to see that, the two parts of skills that you spoke about, which is that how do you handle those difficult conversations, and also sort of explore AI's basic different opportunities and avenues. We see that people trust AI a lot to be more vulnerable. Ask AI about how to handle these difficult situations, and really taking AI as an aid or as a co-pilot, co-mentor, whatever we want to call it, that hey, I have a very tough situation with my team member. This person is very difficult to manage, becoming very emotional, and how do I handle this person, right? So getting some quick hacks, just in time support, or something which they really are feeling uh, difficult to manage, AI is able to come to our rescue. And a lot of people need to know that. So I think it's not just about facts and tangible, quantified things that AI can help them with, but very soft, difficult human things, human issues that it can provide them some framework to think on and really have that process where they can be more objective and not so emotional about it.
Yeah.
So pretty spot on. And yeah, I think as humans we'll always have those communication and managerial issues. It's always about changing generations, and people in the next generation, we just cannot relate to them, and we feel that their thinking style, working style is so different from ours. And how we really align that all the time is something that is becoming even more tougher in today's world. So
Absolutely.
interesting. So, all right, as we come to also, this has been super exciting, and I really think I feel that we should just keep talking. But also, in interest of time, I would just like to pose the last question today, and then I'll open up the floor for people to ask questions. Any example where you feel that, when we look at cultivating potential of talent in these skills, which could be complex problems or agility, AI, can you take an example, or would you want to share some story with our audience where you had really been able to implement something amazing when it comes to OD intervention, and what kind of impact you saw on the ground?
Sure. So just recently, we ended up launching a mentoring program that I spent the last 5, 6 months kind of putting together. And this was something where Kaiser Permanente, where I work, they already have a national mentoring program, but the client group that I work with, they wanted a localized version where they could take their senior level leaders in their kind of local area and have them matched with other managers and directors to really kind of support their development. And, this was, I think, like the third or fourth mentoring program that I created over time, and each one of them has been very different. And so in this one, what was really neat about it was literally the top executive who was the executive sponsor who was there in every one of the meetings, who was wanted to make it very intentional how we were doing things, wanted consideration for the people, didn't want to just be create an application and then we're going to look at what the system recommends and then okay, it says you match with this person, or have people just go in and pick a person that they want. They wanted to have a very intentional kind of methodical process with it. And it took a lot of time, a lot of conversations, talking about difficult conversations. We had, dozen, 12, 15 people part of this committee representing different parts of the business that were all contributing ideas to this. So it really took listening to all those different ideas, coming back, trying to summarize, come back, show something, and then the thoughts would kind of evolve as we would go through meeting to meeting. So constantly trying to kind of iterate as we're moving along. But we finally got to a place to where, people were able to go create a profile, talk about what they were really interested in, why that mattered to them, what they were looking to get as a result of it. And then, we got together with our committee, and we presented them all these basically files and kind of walked them through person by person. And they had conversations on each one of these folks that we were kind of looking at, and then selected ones that we're going to bring for basically like an interview. So then again, they would walk in and there was a room with like 15, 20 people in there, like top executives, other leaders. And we had some questions that we created beforehand. They rotated who would ask the questions. We would just listen to their responses. And then we had a separate time just to talk and debrief, each of those conversations and look at which mentors might pair well with that person to make it very intentional and say, this person, for instance, wants to learn more about the business, but they also really want to get out of their comfort zone. They feel like they're really kind of introverted and shy, and they don't feel all that comfortable speaking in public. So they might put that person with two different mentors, one that can help them learn about the business, another one who's really great at presenting. And so it allowed it to be very customized, like we were talking about earlier, allowed it to be very personal, people that they knew, very localized. But it was just, it was their sort of process that they did. So we're running the pilot for that program now. I suspect with how we've done it, it's going to go pretty well. Mentoring programs, about 98% of Fortune 100 companies have mentoring programs. They've grown coming out of the pandemic. The percentage that had them wasn't as high. It's certainly grown now. It's pretty much 100% at this point. Because they're realizing the importance of investing in people and that sort of very personalized feedback when you're able to provide that. The challenge is that you can only do it with so many people. Scale is a challenge. So that's again where something like AI can help augment that sort of process. It won't be the same, but it can kind of do as best as it can to try to provide some of that experience.
Wow, that's so amazing, and congratulations. That's like a lot of work, right? Just going around and looking at every individual, looking at their priorities. That's like a lot of work. So congratulations for pulling that off. And I'm sure that this will be a super duper successful thing, because I hear so many organizations really banking on their future talent pipeline, basis their mentoring programs and the success of those. So I'm very certain that this will be a great program for Kaiser Permanente. And thank you for sharing that insight with us, Tony. So perfect. This was like super exciting and engaging conversation. Thank you for opening up the world of OD and so many possibilities for really tech to blend with humans in a field which seems so human centric, so specific to, and belongs to coaches, mentors, and really OD practitioners as humans. I think quite excited to see that technology has a play to make it far more data driven and impactful. With that, we are going to close the session, but I have a few questions from audience. So hi audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat box and we can take 2 questions if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, so here is our first question, Tony. So Mansi asks that, how does AI fairly assess soft skills?
Yeah, this is one where kind of have 2 answers here. One, I'm not an expert on, particulars of different AIs. So I'm going to just be really careful and not kind of speak on things I don't know about there. On the other side, the other answer to that is that we have seen different results from different AIs, and how well they're able to do things. And that is an area around emotional intelligence and things of that nature that they're continuing to try improving with these different versions. Part of the challenge with AI is there is a kind of social and ethical kind of concern or consideration that needs to be made, because when we're talking about soft skills, for example, specifically that, and if we're talking even more specifically about leadership skills or just soft skills in general, there's been a lot of historical biases that have happened about different groups, and AIs require inputs to help them form their outputs. So if they're learning inputs that already have biases incorporated into them, and there's not mechanisms for them to counter that, then it is easier for them to reinforce sometimes potentially biases. And soft skills can also be very subjective. So if one person communicates a certain way, someone might say they're demonstrating leadership, they're very direct, they're very strong, and someone else could say they're too forceful, they're too brash, it's over dominating. And so that also becomes a challenge in just you're taking a behavior and there's kind of a subjective perception to how we look at that. So I think there's ways where I've seen examples that AI has done all right with it, but it's still going to take some time. And I think anything should just be take it as a word of advice or as one data point, but I wouldn't say put like all of your stock into just because an AI said something. Similar to working with a coach. Yeah, even a coach, human coach can get things wrong. So no different than working with a person, I would say.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. And thanks for being so forgiving.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, it's a silver bullet. AI is there and AI is going to solve all the problems. And I'm like, no. So thank you for saying that. Okay, we have a couple of more questions, interestingly. So I like this question, so I may just ask this. How can we develop abstract skills on the job?
Okay, abstract skills on the job. So, I mean, I guess it's depends somewhat on like what type of abstract skills we're talking about. But if I just think of some that come to mind, for instance, strategic planning can be somewhat abstract. You can approach it many different ways. And so that's one where I think developing those on the job, having people actually try doing the thing, getting experience with it, even if they don't know, just the act of trying to do it creates a lot of learning in itself. And then coupling that with, okay, now we're going to go back and basically debrief, learn what worked well, what did not work well, what would you do differently, create learning from the experience, do basically some action learning, and then go back, okay, now maybe try it again. Or, we're going to have you now work with this group and now try strategic planning with them. Maybe you do a simulation. You can do that as a workshop. You can give them a case study or a scenario to kind of work from. Have them just kind of take their own team as a use case and practice something like that. But experiential learning is really, really powerful for trying to work on this abstract stuff, especially if we get them mixed with other people, because each person brings different perspectives, different experiences. And so it's all able to kind of fill and add to that to give us a more complete picture so that we can kind of learn more. So you can go and kind of learn about it. It's always good. Like, what is strategic planning? You'll probably read about a SWOT analysis, but then there's nothing that replaces just doing it. And so I think the more that you can get people in an environment where they can get hands-on experience with it, and then have a process to learn from that experience, that's where you really, I think, you're going to maximize the learning for some of those more abstract things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I love the idea, and that's what we perpetuate, that action learning and applying nudges on the job. I think that's like something which is so powerful. But I particularly like the idea of once I've practiced, I have my own mental model. What if I can exchange those ideas with others and I can learn from others and their practices and what they have experienced. So this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I think, Tony, this was fantastic. And I just love this conversation. As always, I always enjoy my conversations with you. They just always enlighten me with some new perspectives. So thank you for joining us today. And there are, of course, more questions coming in, which I would just email to you, and would love to be in touch and keep discussing this topic.
Sounds great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, everyone who's joined us today. And lovely meeting you all here. And have a wonderful day ahead, Tony and everyone else.
Sounds great. Have a wonderful day, Nikita. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.